Hi, and welcome to Seven Story Publishing. My name is Lisa, and I am here today with author Jordan Fitch. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I am good, and I'm excited to talk about your new release. Can you tell us all about that? You just published your second book?
Sure. Yeah. My second book. I have a copy here. Name Town. So I'm.
Ooh,
Let's hold that up a little closer there.
very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
I'm a thriller writer, but I like to write thrillers that are a little bit off the norm. I want to go a bit deeper into characters and motivations, and I want to write a book that says something about the human condition, or about our lives a little more than the average thriller probably. But it was still fast paced stories with intricate plot lines and all that. So this book is a small town thriller. It's about a town. The protagonist is both the town council president and the school history teacher in this town, and they discover that their town is named after a fairly nefarious character from history, who had done some atrocious things with Native Americans 200 years ago. So as they're gearing up to celebrate their bicentennial, they're the protagonist and the town as a whole are faced with a conundrum, looking at modern sentiment where, do we try to rename and change? Do we knock down statues? Do we how do we deal with history that is unpleasant and uncomfortable? So that's kind of the premise. So he has to guide the town. He proposes a vote to rename the town, and that split, as one can imagine, splinters the small community of friends and neighbors and people who have known each other their whole lives, and sort of different factions form whether they want to keep the same name, if they want to name it a couple different things. So it kind of on a small scale is kind of a microcosm of what we're seeing nationwide with identities being challenged, identities being threatened, and people questioning what they know. So that's kind of the backdrop. And then there's other more recent history, dark secrets, family secrets, things that are happening, reasons why people are motivated, and the town kind of splinters into chaos for a few different reasons. So spoiler free. There's a few different reasons, not just the identity that's being threatened, but some other dark secrets in the history. Um, the main character, Tom Darby, and then the second POV character is Piper Wells, and she is a sort of a protege of his. She's 10 years younger. She was he mentored her growing up, and she's like more of a modern young girl who doesn't want to stay in this backwoods town. Who went to college and kind of sees college life and different ways that people live, and she's attracted by everything that the outside world has to offer, but she's stuck in this town for a few different reasons. She tries to find ways to establish a life, but gets into trouble, and now she's stuck there, and she's got to clean up some stuff before she can leave. So she also begins to contribute to the chaos of the town based on what she's doing. So the two protagonists are they both need to understand what's happening in the background, and there's more with the history, and there's more dark secrets, people who have died in the past, and under questionable circumstances. So there's some of that, and there's a few different elements that go in, and then it's a fast-paced story. It's a 330-page story. The whole thing takes place in 8 days. So it's even though it incorporates history, and has ties to recent past and more distant past, the whole plot of the story takes place within 8 days, and there's reasons to kind of keep that clock on as they're kind of leading up to the bicentennial and the vote, and sort of things snowball as more is revealed, and more people have different and opposing stakes in what the outcome is. So yeah. that's my rambling answer to what the book's about.
No, it sounds really awesome. The history that you talk about, is it history that you made up, or is it history from real life that you took inspiration from?
There is a nugget of real life history where there was a character who was involved in a Native American massacre 200 years ago. That part of it's real. He after that, this character was several of his associates were sentenced and hanged. He escaped and was never heard from again. So I kind of pick it up there where he founded a different town. And this isn't really a spoiler. This is all revealed within the first chapter, basically. So so I kind of pick it up, but I also fabricate journal entries from him that precede every chapter. So it kind of tells his story too, as his story and his thoughts evolve. That have some loose parallels with the modern day plot as well.
That's really cool. How did you come up with the idea to do something like that with the journal entries before each chapter like that? That's so interesting and different.
I've seen some other books do that where they have like Brandon Sanderson. I'm not sure if my camera shows him. I got some Brandon Sanderson in the back, but like he has like text from like ancient texts that will precede some of his chapters and some of his stories. So I think I think that's a cool concept that you can kind of do that. So this isn't exactly like that, but it's just like a snippet of ancient text in world text that kind of is telling a different story, but related to the modern story. So I kind of got the notion of using that as an element from that. But I think there's plenty of other books that kind of do something similar.
I think that's so awesome. What inspired you to write this actual story itself?
So I always want to I read some advice somewhere that you should be able to boil your story down to ideally one word, like not just one sentence or one theme, but even one word that kind of ties everything together. So for my first book, The Cardinal Line, it was more control.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the simplicity.
Yeah. So this is more it's still a fast-paced thriller. It's a bit more speculative science. That's a whole different topic. But this I wanted to write something that could boil down to one word, and that word is identity. So it's about identity as people see themselves. They see themselves within groups, as groups fracture and evolve and form factions, tribes, if you will. And so the concept of this was kind of came about in a convoluted way. I was reading Blake Crouch's Dark Matter, and that's one or a recursion, Dark Matter or recursion. I forget which is the one that has that's sci-fi, completely different type of story. But he writes some good stuff. But in the book, the characters needed pills to get to different dimensions, eventually in hopes of getting back to their original timeline, original dimension, where their families and stuff were. But they had these special pills, and they had a very limited number of them. So like halfway through the story, the chapter started having subtitles of how many pills they had left as like pills. So that's such a cool concept, like having subtitles as a clock of sorts. Yeah. So I was like, how can I do that? So what I came up with okay, what if, because I wanted to write like a small town thing, because by with the Cardinal Line, it spans several states. I know you're from New Jersey, I think. So some of it took place in New Jersey, some of it was Manhattan, a lot was in Boston, in the Berkshire Mountains. So it was like a big expansive kind of cat and mouse type game that happened with that one. I wanted something that was focused, all in a much smaller geographic area. So I was thinking like what could be like some sort of clock that I could put as a subtitle. And I had a few different ideas. What I eventually came up with was how many days left until the vote. So like as the chapters go, it lists how many days left until the vote. So there's kind of a clock, and then the vote has to happen by as scheduled, because that's like when the bicentennial is. It's also, the other protagonist, Tom Darby, is looking at the vote. If like he pushes it back, then he's basically letting one group win. He's not letting democracy happen, because it'll keep getting pushed back and back. So it's kind of a clockish type of effect that I have. So that's a subtitle, is like how many days left until the vote. And then from there, I was like, okay, I've got that. I want a reason to have a vote that's contentious. So I'm kind of like looked into different areas. There's a reason that it has to be in the certain area of the country. So that's like a part of one of the tribes there that form in town. So I kind of had a general geographic location, and then I looked for real life historical incidents that happened in that area, and then I kind of pieced it together and then worked backwards from there. So a pretty convoluted way of coming up with this story, but I try not to be traditional.
But that's okay. It sounds awesome. I like how you went about it and then you worked backwards, as you got all the pieces together,
Yeah.
and then you put it together. And sometimes as authors and writers, that's the best way to do it. Was it the same thing with your first book?
Kind of. So I had a few different elements that I wanted to have there. So I'm definitely a pantser when I write. I've tried outlining, it doesn't work. I'll try to outline and kind of have an idea. By the time I get to like chapter 2 or 3, I'm like, this is not at all on track. So I don't have that that I can structure the whole thing on paper before I start to write. So I'm definitely on the pantser side of that spectrum. So I don't. There's a lot that I don't have in place. I usually have some of the critical scenes and some of the elements, and then as I write, I figure out how I get there.
Very cool. How different was this book to write than your first one? Was it harder, easier, more enjoyable?
I think there's definitely more pressure for a sophomore effort.
Yeah.
Like the first one, there's zero expectations, which is great, because and I got some really great response to the Cardinal Line, my first one. So I'm like, okay, I better at least like meet that level, if not exceed it. It's a very different type of story, even though it's still within the general thriller category. It's a very different type of story, and certainly I think my writing evolved too. So and then I also had like the mechanics of self-publishing down, and kind of had that lined up. There's some changes. There's a lot more that I did myself, or outsourcing some of the formatting and stuff like that. That I probably spent too much on the first round, because I was kind of overwhelmed with the whole process. But I'm like fairly savvy with most computer programs, so I can there's a lot I can do myself and don't need to outsource. I did outsource the cover design because I'm not a graphic artist, but besides that, as far as the formatting and a lot of the process of submitting and everything like that, I also use beta readers for my second one, which I didn't for the first one, for better or worse. So that's kind of fun, picking about a dozen, family and friends, like, hey, here, take a look. And so I got some really good feedback from that as well.
That's awesome. So you did do a lot of things differently this time. You learned a
Yeah,
lot from the first one. Is there
certainly. Yeah.
anything from writing the second one, kind of advice you would give a new author who's looking to self-publish or publish their first book?
I say, take your time. There's no rush. It's exciting to think I can get this out within 3 months or 6 months, depending on where you are in the process. But it's there's rarely any real deadline, especially if you're self-publishing. I mean, that's one of the great advantages. You kind of work on your own schedule. So if you need to set your own timeline just for the motivation, then that's great. But take your time, make sure it's right. There's always room for another pass. As you go through. Ensure that things are good. There's a lot of great software out there. I use a program called Living Writer, and so that's kind of like Scrivener. I know that's one of the more popular ones, but I haven't used that personally. But Living Writer's great. There's ways to try, especially if you have like complex storylines with timelines, and it's got all the elements. You can put notes, you can kind of draw up family trees and timelines and everything like that to references to outside articles if you have that type of story that you need that. So it's great to have those references and make sure that okay, this person is this old when that and like make sure that it makes sense because readers are going to pick that apart.
Yeah, they are. Does it help you stay organized too?
Oh, certainly, yeah. It's got you can set goals, set word count goals, per day for the whole book, per chapter. So it helps me, like, I try to I'm not too much of a stickler on chapter word count, but I try to keep them roughly the same. So it's a good read. If I'm getting a chapter that's too long, I'm like, okay, do I need to split this up, or is there something I can take out? I definitely I like cutting. I tend to overwrite at first, and then it's satisfying going and cutting. Like, I'm very strict about that. Some people are the opposite. Some people are more underwriters, where they'll kind of write out the bones and then flesh it out. I like to go back and find every word, every sentence, every paragraph that isn't needed, and cut it. So I like to get to the core of the story, and if it's not necessary for the story in some way, I'm it's like hard to kill your darlings, but that's part of it. So
No, this is great for new writers and new authors to hear. I'm hearing about all these different kinds of software that I never even heard of before. So now I'm going to go look up Living Writer
yeah,
because it
yeah.
sounds awesome. And I love the idea too of overwriting, because then you can really kind of tone things down, make it a lot better, like you were talking about. Do you have a favorite thing about being an author or a writer?
Um, it's a great creative outlet. So it's not my main job at this point, but it's certainly something I'll continue with, and then years down the road, it's something I can do in retirement. If those circumstances change, I would that'd be great too. But at this point, I'm staying realistic. But it's a great creative outlet. It forces me to learn as well, because I like to write the type of books I like to read. The type of books I like to read are ones that challenge what I think and what I think I know and what I have learned. So I like books where I learn things, and I got a lot of response for the Cardinal Line for that, where people like stopped and said, like, wait a minute, I didn't know that, and then they'll stop and look something up and like, oh yeah, he's right. So things like that people are learning and kind of getting different perspective, whether it's something factual or something more intuitive. I see you have a background in psychology, which is awesome for a writer, because so much about character is psychological, as far as motivations and understanding why people do what they do, and kind of what motivates them. And that's something that I look for when I read is I want to understand what the motivation is, or at least have an opportunity to figure it out if the author doesn't tell me something to speculate on, not just some generic character. So I like to read, but it forces me to explore more type of books that I might not otherwise. Like I'll read a stack of books that I think will help with this novel. The stack I had for this one was pretty diverse, but so kind of forces me to learn more and understand, make sure I have a good understanding of what I'm writing, and being respectful to the people and the places that are involved, because this one definitely touches on some sensitive areas. So
I think that's really smart to, do your research and be able to have factual stuff. How long did it take you to write this book with all the research and reading that you did?
I think Dametown, well, from conception, I tend to kind of toss around ideas in my head. I might take a stab at chapter one for a few times, but I'll toss around ideas for like 6 months or so, while I'm doing other things. Unless so that's kind of my mo so far. Before I've really conceptualized, I'll take notes and things like that, like before I really start to try to write it. And then during that time, we'll read, pick books that I think will be helpful. to read. Um, so that, and then once I start writing, it's about 12 months. So I'd say for both books, it was about an 18-month process from like conception to, okay, I've got the final draft ready to publish. So give or take a few months, but it averages around there. So that's kind of my pace, which is, slow compared to a lot of authors, but I also have a, family and full-time job and stuff. So I'm fine with that. And
Exactly. Everyone's journey is different, and I think that 18 months is more realistic than some other authors. So I'm glad that you talk about that too. And you said you've got a full-time job and family. So what made you want to start writing and become a published author?
it's always something I've thought about. I've always been a big reader, throughout my whole life. When I was um, fourth grade, I think I had to get permission from my parents to check out Stephen King's It from the school library. So like I've always been like, like that looks like a big book. I want to read it. Um, so,
Yeah.
so I've always read. I read a lot of fantasy books in like high school, and started to write a few back then. I've got some notes kicking around somewhere, but then it's kind of. I was in the Marine Corps, and I've had a few jobs. Like electrical engineering background. So that's my degree. So I just kind of got in the corporate world and family life and everything else. I've still kept it with reading a lot. And then it was just a few years ago that I was like reading a book. I was on a
Mhm.
plane. I picked up a bestseller, sort of sci-fi thriller type book, and I was like, I started reading it. I was like, this is really fun. But then like I realized I was starting to pick apart different parts of it. I'm like, I would have done this differently, or like I don't like what they did here. And then I'm like, what, let me give this a shot. So it was kind of like, the timing in my life was right, where I had enough space, um, to settle down and see what I could do. So
I love it. You never let the dream go and you found a way to make it happen.
yeah, so
Um, is there anything you're working on now? I know you just published Nametown, but are you working on any other projects, a third book? Are either of these going to be series?
yeah. I don't have any series in the works for either of these. I think Nametown probably won't be. Cardinal Line could be. I've had a lot of people
Mhm.
ask, like, when the next one coming out. I'm like, well, I don't have, like, I left a couple threads in there on purpose. I mean, it's a fully complete story on its own, but there's a few threads in there that certainly could be expanded upon in the same realm with the same characters. So there is serious potential there, but I don't have anything in the works. But I do want to write a series. So that's my next project, is again in the thriller category. So that's what I've been kind of churning on for the last few months during the
Cool.
launch process for Nametown is the next one. So I think I'm pretty close to being ready to start to actually crank out the first draft. I just had to work through a few details and kind of get some character motivations and kind of like, okay, why is this happening type of thing. And most of that's in my head. I've got some notes, but I'll kind of see how it fleshes out when I actually well, I would say put pen to paper, but I guess put fingers to keyboard. So um,
Yeah. Do you take do you keep everything in your head? Do you take notes? Tell us a little bit about that process. We have about 6.5 more minutes left. So
sure.
I'd love to know how that works when you get like inspiration and ideas.
Yep. So I've got I am, like, I always have my phone on me. I've got my work phone. I've got my personal phone. So either if I'm like driving or something like that, I'll just knock out a voice memo, like just kind of like a ramble for a few minutes, and then eventually transcribe that into notes in Living Writer, or just like I take notes on the app. So I tend to do that, and then every week or so I'll sit down and consolidate all the notes to kind of see what makes sense, and kind of that helps with inspiration to kind of seeing what some notes that I took a few weeks ago. So I'll kind of keep track as I'm going about my day that way, and then consolidate, and then as I said, I'm not like plotting out the entire book, just kind of like snippets or scenes or characters, and then kind of go from there.
That's so awesome. I feel like as authors and writers, we get, inspired at really strange and odd times. Was there ever a time that you were really shocked to get inspiration and write something down, or like a weird time that you got inspired?
That's a great question. Certainly traveling around. Yeah. So there were a couple times I could say. I say so. I'm a runner. So usually running is when I do most of my thinking. Like I'll have music in too, but I'm like tuning out the music and just so like any type of exercise. So certainly running. There's been plenty of times that I'll stop and take notes. I remember with the Cardinal Line, I live in the Pacific Northwest now, but I was back in New Hampshire hiking Mount Ascutney in the winter, like snowshoeing up Mount Ascutney, and I was on my way down. I think I was hiking alone, and I like stopped halfway down in the snow because like I just had a whole flood and took like probably 10 minutes of voice memos because I had a bunch of things that hit, and then that was with the Cardinal Line, my first one, and then with Nametown, I sent out my story for beta, and then there was a couple kind of recurring notes that I got back from a few of the readers that spoke to character motivation and kind of some things that needed something else. So I was trying to figure out what it was that would kind of tie that together, and it was again I was on a hike with a friend. This was here in Washington State. And I was like hiking. I think I was probably descending at the time. I'm like, just click. I'm like, oh, ooh, that's good. I'm going to do that. So
That's the best feeling.
yeah. So I guess exercise. That's what stimulates the juices.
That's awesome. I love that, and thank goodness we have our phones now so we can just put them in there. Voice notes are amazing.
Mhm.
And Living Writer has an app. That sounds really cool.
Yep. So it's an online site and it has an app and it's a fairly reasonable subscription fee. But it's a great way to track everything. So a Living Writer and then Atticus, Atticus IO that is for like the formatting. So that's my final stage. Like
Oh,
a Living Writers for the sandbox to get out the first
yeah.
few drafts, and then when I'm like ready to publish, I switch to Atticus and work on the formatting and kind of add in the the table of contents and the acknowledgments and all that type of stuff. So and then that can export for KDP, for Ingram Spark, for whatever format that you want. If you're like sending to queries, it'll like export in doc or PDF or whatever. So that's what I use Atticus for.
That's awesome. These are really great tips and ideas for aspiring authors and writers too. Very cool. Where can everyone find you? Social media, website? Can we all follow you and your journey with Nametown?
Okay. So the one constant is my website, jordanwrites.net. So just like I said, jordanwrites.net. So I've got updates on events and links and everything there. But the main purchase place is Amazon and Barnes and Noble. You just search for my name and the name of the books. It's again, The Cardinal Line is my first one,
Yeah.
and then Nametown is just released this month, so or last month. So yeah. And
Congrats
then
again on number 2.
thank you.
Any
Yes.
last thoughts? Any last thing you'd want to tell everybody?
No, just I think I speak for most most indie authors is like engagement is huge. And, a great way to support is to read. Both my books are on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have that service, you can read them both for free. And then leaving reviews is huge, because that's how like spreading word, leaving reviews. That's really the best way to support independent artists of any type, whether authors or any other medium. So just kind of a general request: if you find independent, creators out there that you support, that you enjoy their content, the best way to support is to engage, leave reviews, go to their events if they have any. So just a thank you to all the readers who have given me a chance, and it's a super fun world to be part of, and I'm excited to continue.
Absolutely. You bring up such a great point. Leaving a review is free, engagement
Right.
is free.
Right.
And I think that's amazing. I'm super excited to see where your book goes. I'm going to check it out.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, of course. It's the exact type of book I like to read. I've been needing new books.
Cool. Cool.
So I'll check it out too, definitely. Thank you so much, Jordan Fitch, for being with
Yep.
us. And congrats again on book number 2.
Thanks so much for your time, Lisa. It was great talking to you.
Absolutely. My name is Lisa with 7 Story Publishing. Thanks again.
Bye.